All right, everybody. I think we're rolling. Hey, this is Adam Scott, head GM and founder of RPG Club. If you don't know what we do, take a look at the link in our profile. We have run thousands of professional games for D&D and TTRPG players online. We've taught thousands of people. And this all started in a bar because we were trying to figure out how to get people to show up to game night. So that's what we're about. Let's move on to why you're here today. I've been asked to make a video, and I've been thinking about this for a while because I find this actually a really hard topic to describe. And the concept is, or the topic is, what game or what gameplay style is right for me? Like, what's the right type of game I should play in or that I should look for, especially if I'm a new player? And so I've been thinking about this, and I found it very challenging to figure out how to explain this in a way that doesn't steer people in the wrong direction, while at the same time providing some structured support. So this is going to be my best effort for that. I'm not going to milk the algorithm. I'm going to get right into it. So here's what I see. Game masters, well, I want to make an assumption that you have a game master that is responsive to you, that is engaged with you and wants to help you have a great experience, whether that's a friend at home, a professional with some company like RPG Club, or somebody you met at a game store and they're there trying to make a great adventure and so that you have a great time. Without that pathway of communication, none of this works. So I'm assuming that that's there. So here's something that I've seen, and we've taught thousands of players and we've run games for thousands of players, and we've seen some commonalities. What I've noticed is that player experience and how players feel comfortable with using their character, like actually if they had a video game controller and the character in the game world was being controlled by that controller, like the more comfortable they are with knowing how to use their character, the more confident they are in terms of what type of story they're in. And actually they may prefer slightly different types of GM storytelling styles. So the reason this is important is your game master gets to make a lot of decisions that impact your experience directly. And most game masters, they want to help and provide something that you really like. That's kind of that's the fun part of doing it. So it's important as a player to be able to identify what type of experience you're looking to have, because the build up and then payoff to that, build up to and payoff from that experience, it's really helpful if the GM knows what you're looking to have, because then they can create an experience that supports that. So here's what we've seen. Players that are new, and I'm not talking about like brand new players who are playing for the first time. That's kind of a very structured thing. But players who've been played one or two times and they know how to roll the dice, but don't know a whole lot else. Maybe they've created a character. We've noticed that very structured experiences tend to be the ones they enjoy the most, like an experience where a player may get 3 or 4 choices in a scene and the GMs provide lots of support. And it's heavily plot and narrative driven, where there are things happening and there's a story that's unfolding, and players like to follow those steps along, almost as if the game master presents a few options and the players check out those options in each encounter. And then as they discover which one is the best option or makes the most sense for the story, they kind of proceed along that path. What that creates is it feels a lot like a movie, a very familiar movie, or when you watch a movie from start to finish, you go, oh, I like that. There was a beginning, middle, and end, and there was a coherence to it, and I got to make some decisions along the way. That concept, depending on how heavily the game master implements it, could be called railroading. It could also just be called plot-driven or linear storytelling. Now, there's a huge negative perspective by some game masters in the hobby, but don't let that scare you. If you're a new player and you're trying to figure out, hey, I want to have I like Lord of the Rings and I want to sit down and experience a coherent narrative for 3 hours, a story that's railroaded, that has barriers to what one can do, to what your player character could do, or some just limited options, actually could be very beneficial. And what I've noticed is that players that are new tend to really enjoy this because they're not really sure how much stuff their character can do, but they know their character can do some stuff. Yes, sometimes their character could think of something outside of those options. And GMs, when you have that good communication with them, I mean, if someone says that to me, if I present 3 options to a new player and they're like, what if I do this? I'm like, yeah, let's try it. But the idea is there's clear options, clear choices players can make, and that empowers them to start feeling comfortable with controlling their character. because controlling a role-playing character for you, especially if you're new, it's not intuitive. Like there's ways that the game works and you don't know what you can do. Like playing a video game is pretty intuitive. Pick up the control, move around, and interact with stuff. Learning that in a role-playing game can be a little bit of a challenge. So if you're new and you want that kind of experience of kind of a coherent story, you might want to say to your GM, hey, I'd like something that has a little more railroading to it, or a little bit more linear. So we have that coherent plot, that moves. Most GMs are like, cool, sounds great. The good ones do. The good ones will take care of you. Now, we've also seen as players become more comfortable with their character, they understand what their character can do. Game masters tend to support that by opening up the rails in a sense of maybe when a game master presents an encounter, like the players walk in, you walk into an inn and there's something going on. The game master doesn't direct your attention to certain things. They just say you walk into an inn, here's what you see. What would your character like to do? But you're in a physically enclosed space in the game world. So there's some parameters to what a character would do. In an inn, there's some logic to it. Like maybe I look around, go up to the tavern keep and get a beverage, talk to somebody. If there's someone sitting there, hang back, invest. Like there's some logic to how one might operate in that space. So as a player, if you're more comfortable with your character and you're like, I want to have some more autonomy in my experience, but I also want there to be I don't want it to seem so vast that there's I have no idea what to do. You could express to your game master, I like the stories that have a little bit of a linear story, a little more railroading, but open up the guardrails, open up those rails so I have some freedom to do things within that story. We found players that have a little more experience, but are not they haven't been playing for years. They kind of like that. Now, it might be totally different for you because you're going to have a style that works in a way that you hopefully want. And it's important to just be in tune with that so you can communicate it. Now, as we've seen with players, as they get more and more experience, sometimes they say, I have a character and I want that character to go on an adventure that I choose. Like I want to pick, I know how to interact with the world. So now it's time for my character to kind of be the star of the show in terms of the actions. Now, what that leads into is it could be more of something called either a living world or a sandbox style campaign, where the game master has created the world and the players, in essence, come into it and then interact in their own way. And then just based on those player choices, the story kind of unfolds through that process. I know for many more experienced players, it's very satisfying because the characters that they create and the choices they make directly allow that story to emerge and flow. There's no predetermined pathway. This is very complicated to do from the game mastering side. So this process of creating a world that's fully fleshed out, that's living and moving organically in terms of all the characters in it have motivations, all the places have identities, and there's things going on about them that are significant. This castle's significant. This forest has a meaning. This magic system works. That's really complex to create. And what I've noticed is a lot of players who are very new to Dungeons and Dragons and role playing, they see these types of worlds on popular streaming media, which is awesome. There's very popular streamers, very prominent professional game masters that put on productions where this is a very common game style. What I see a lot of new players see is they're like, I want that. Well, the reason why those popular media shows are effective and they're so engaging is the game masters are highly experienced and they have prepared extensively at a professional level with production equipment. And the players who are in those games are usually both professional performers and they've been playing role-playing games for maybe 10 or 20 years. So they understand how to use their character. So to say, I want that sandbox style, naturally emerging story flow, there's lots of boxes that are checked that are not communicated in those popular media programs or streams to the new players who see them. So if you see that and you go, I want that, it's possible. It's also a continuum of, for many folks, learning kind of how to use your character to give yourself more confidence. But if that's what you want, there's ways to work up toward it, or you can ask your GM to prepare that. But keep in mind, it is very time consuming for GMs to prepare sandbox experiences, and players also have to puts a lot of pressure on players to make the decisions, because without the players doing things, the story doesn't happen. So let's just do a quick review. If you're a player and you're someone who thinks, I want kind of a coherent, plot-driven narrative that seems kind of like a movie where I can sit down, I enjoy it, there's a story, I have some agency to do some things, but I don't really want to get lost. That's something we call railroading. And if you tell your GM that, they can say, sure, we'll railroad you with a linear experience and we can try to make stuff move and happen, and you'll make a few choices along the way, but we'll get to the end and it'll be awesome. If you want to have more autonomy and you also feel more confident in controlling your character, you may tell your GM, I like the linear storytelling with like a clear plot. There's a bad guy, or there's an objective, or there's something that has to happen, rising action, falling action, but give me some room to maneuver. Like I'm okay if I go off track a little bit. You don't need to necessarily bump me right back right away. And that's called widening those rails a little bit. And then there's the other end of the spectrum where, if you're looking for full autonomy, again, with also the most pressure for yourself to have to make those key decisions to drive action. Because if you're the one who's interacting with the game world that's going to control the story, the game master's not going to do it for you. Like if your character's like, I don't know what to do, the game master will be like, well, better do something, because that's the only way the story moves forward. But if you're comfortable with that and you feel confident in that style, let the game master know, and they might be able to come up with a situation or an experience that works for you. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know what feedback you have. This is something that comes up a lot, and your personal gameplay style it's going to be different than everybody else's. But one of the hardest things in the hobby is to find a table of people who want to play a similar style. I'm not even talking similar theme, like, oh, I want to play in the Conan universe, or I want to play Harry Potter style games. Like that is a much less challenging problem than finding the way the story is told. Because if you're at a table and you want an open world sandbox adventure where you can just poke your head into whatever happens in the game world, and someone sitting next to you is like, I want the plot to move. I want there to be, A, B, C, and we're over, the action A, action B, action C, and then we overcome something and there's a resolution. Those are different experiences. And to think that they can mesh together at the same table is not really being honest. It's very hard to mesh two different goals with the same game. So when you tell your GM, hey, here's what I want, here's what I'm looking for, two things can happen. And a good GM will do this. This is sort of a plug for RPG Club, but not necessarily. So players often throughout the history of this hobby have felt like they have to do whatever the game master says in terms of gameplay style, because it's so hard to find games. And it has been for a very long time. But assume that assume that if there's a game master who said, we're going to do it, I'm not going to do it that way, you could just go over here, like turn, and there's another game master who's like, yeah, I'd be happy to run it that way. So let's make that a quick assumption. Many players for a long time in the role-playing hobby have felt like they can't really have input on the story because there's no other game mastering option. But with companies like RPG Club, with communities that have GMs who really want to run games in various ways to serve players, it's a lot easier to find a game. So if you can get on a Zoom call and you can join a game on RPG Club, it's that simple. So our website has all kinds of games available. There's all sorts of GMs with different play styles. And when the point is, that you have a certain preferred play style, you can tell your GM, hey, here's what I'm looking for. And a good GM, if they are not going to run that type of game, will just tell you like, hey, I'm not going to run that. Let me see if I can help you find a game that's more to your preference. And that's actually one benefit that we have with RPG Club is our GMs work together to put you in the right spot. But if you're out there at a game store, you might have to ask around a little bit. But if you know what kind of game you want and you're open with your communication, it'll put you in a position to have a better long-term experience. And when you see those as a new player, you see the media, you see the streams where they're having these amazing, engaging back and forth experiences, that's because they're all on the same page. Also, it's because many of them have tons of experience, and the only way to get that experience is to actually play. Like most likely you will not get to that level of deeply satisfying experience unless you play the TTRPG that you're watching on stream. So I would encourage you to play the game if you're actually wanting to be a part of it and feel what it's like, because it's a great experience and new players are always welcome, especially at RPG Club. So my name's Adam Scott. Take a look at our link in our bio. We've worked with thousands of people. We've worked with hundreds of GMs. Like, we love doing this. And I look forward to seeing you next time around. If you have a comment or a question, feel welcome to drop it down below. If you have a video request, I'm happy to take topic requests. And I will see you again next time.